Welcome back, everybody, to another Verdant intro interview. I'm here today with the assistant coach, Harry, otherwise known as ATN. Thank you for joining me today, man.
Hey, you're welcome, boss.
So, the term assistant coach can be one that I think feels a bit nebulous or undefined at times. People aren't quite sure what that role means in reality. What does that role mean to you, and what is the ATN style of assistant coach?
Man, um, dude, I think that's actually kind of a hard question. I think, as you say, I think
Yeah.
like assistant coach is kind of very like undefined. Like it kind of
Yeah.
means many things to different people. Like to some people, it can be like very limited to, I guess, doing jobs that the head coach doesn't want to do,
Mm.
almost. So some head coaches can be very hands-on when it comes to scrum practice and like scrum prep. Some head coaches want to focus predominantly on draft or focus on individual, like the more individual side of coaching. So to some extent, like head coach and assistant coach are kind of like constantly in a state of communication between what the head coach doesn't want to do and what the assistant coach can sort of undertake to, I guess, to take it quite literally, like assist to the greatest effect.
Yeah.
Um, I myself, I don't really see myself like that. I like to be very not independent, but I like to be very hands-on with what I like to do and what I want to do with the team. Um, so for the most part, like I like to be very heavily involved in the scrim side of things, like helping with team-wide prep and team-wide practice. But also, like I'm very strong at developing like sort of interpersonal or interprofessional relationships with the players. So,
Mm.
working with them on a one-to-one basis and making sure that they're understanding not only the team-wide goals, but also making sure that they understand their individual goals as well. So that essentially, like when they come to practice in any sort of format, they understand what they're doing and understanding what we expect of them. Because again, like what I like to do is be quite heavily involved in the building of the culture of the team,
Yeah.
which is essentially making sure that the work ethic of the team is really strong, making sure the environment is professional, but also, mainly we want it to be fun for the players. Like we don't want people to take things too seriously in a way. Like
Hmm.
at the end of the day, we're still like, albeit professionally, playing a game.
Hmm.
So again, like that's kind of what I like being involved with, like making sure that the culture is good.
Yeah.
And again, like making sure, essentially, like what I always say to the players, it's become a bit of a joke at this point, but control what you can and disregard what you can't. And that's kind
Yeah.
of my stance on coaching.
Sure. Well, that's a fantastic answer, man. You've actually answered a couple more of my questions just through that one, so we love to hear that. I guess in your Twitter bio, it says future EU and world champion. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a bit about those aspirations? Do you vision yourself as a head coach down the line, more on the analysis side, more directly what you do now, or what does that future championship look like to you?
Again, that's actually a really good question. I don't think anybody's actually asked me that outside of, people who know me quite well.
Mm.
So for me, that is always like a goal, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people see esports as being like a dream, which
Mm.
to an extent it is, and being a coach is sort of like you're selling a dream almost, and like you're teaching people how to reach those aspirations and give more life and give more depth to those dreams. Um, Essentially, like I see things in sort of stages, right? Like I try to compartmentalize the process of life, compartmentalize the process of living, and make sure that essentially I always have like goals. Like some people have New Year's resolutions. I'm pretty much the same, but I sort of apply it directly to my coaching, right? Where for me, obviously being the world champion and being EU champion is something a lot of people aspire to be, but I sort of see things in terms of like, so I'm going to be, in NLC 1, I'm going to be coaching with
Mhm.
Verdant, and hopefully like I'll develop for it. Like I will myself develop a lot as a coach and develop
Yeah.
myself as a professional. You know, I'm not just looking to improve my players, but I also want to have like that two-way relationship where I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly improving based on their feedback and also like upon my own reflections, right? And it's sort of like pushing myself to always sort of climb the ladder almost, make sure that next split is going to be even better, either like the quality of my coaching or the quality of my players and my selection process.
Mm.
And essentially, like that will sort of continue up and up and up. Keep like talking to all of the people that I talk to. Make sure that I'm improving. And essentially, like I almost always want to be a coach, right? I don't
Yeah.
necessarily care about being a head coach because again, like I think these titles can be a bit dubious at times. You know, what is a head coach? What is an assistant coach? Like if you compare and contrast that to say a more traditional sports background, like let's say rugby or football or basketball or whatever, you're going to have specific coaches of how you're going to pass the ball. You're going to have specific coaches of how to shoot the ball or whatever. Like you know all of these different titles that you can attach to that, and it's quite specific and quite literal. And for me, like I don't necessarily know what my title is going to be, like whether I'm in a more leadership role, which is what a head coach is right now. Like it's more of a leader and more of an
Yeah.
objective stance of how the team needs to be improving and implementing certain structures and certain plans. Um, but for me, I don't mind stepping into that sort of leadership role. But for me, like I want to continue working at my craft, which is essentially again like culture building and
Hmm.
these sort of interpersonal relationships and making sure that everybody is again like controlling what they can control and disregarding what they can't, right?
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like there is a bit of a lack of kind of culture focused coaching in the scene right now in EU, or maybe just in your own experience?
um I think it's pretty difficult to comment because a
Mm.
lot of the people that I speak to are in the LEC, or at least
Sure.
like have been like very like at the very elite level League of Legends, right?
Yeah.
So I think amongst those elite circles, like it's very widely regarded that culture is sort of the main stepping stone of how you want to build onto a team, right? You
Mhm.
can't just sort of jump straight in and then practice certain systems and practice certain structures, and everything is going to be okay instantly. It doesn't work
Mhm.
like that. Um, so from my experience, like I don't think it is a problem per se, but something that I would certainly recommend to other coaches if they're not doing it already is certainly like look inwardly in terms of what your culture wants to be.
Sure.
Because from my perspective, I always want the players to have very high standards for themselves. If they're making mistakes in lanes or if they're missing opportunities, then they need to be thinking on how to improve that, right? And that is part of my job. I am also like a part of implementing this process. Like I use a more horizontal stance on coaching, which
Mhm.
is to say I ask a lot of questions and I try to be a good facilitator, because for me I think that's objectively the best way to coach, rather
Yeah.
than take a more authoritarian stance where you are dictating the pace of everything. You're dictating the flow of the improvement, and you're making those executive decisions, right? And for me, I
Sure.
don't think that that's necessarily correct. Maybe in the short term because you get through things a lot quicker, but the players have found might not be willing to accept those decisions as readily as if they themselves had helped you to come up with this strategy, right?
Yeah.
Um, so again, like I'd come back to this idea of recommending people to make sure that they're setting these high expectations and these high standards of play, but again, like making sure that the environment is fun for everybody, right? And again, we've got to treat people as individuals. We've got to make sure that everybody is having fun.
Yeah.
um, so I am very hesitant to comment on whether or not it's a problem because I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm not privy to other people's coaching stances. I'm not privy to other people's culture building.
Mhm.
But from a more helpful perspective, I would just question whether or like I'd ask people to look inwardly and question whether or not that their culture that they're building is one that they would personally want to be a part of, right?
Sure. Well, that sounds like a great question to get started with for sure. Thank you very much for your time, Harry. Thank you for those answers. Very thoughtful, very detailed. Thank you for watching, everybody. You can go ahead and follow at Verdant_GG on Twitter to see more of these interviews and plenty more different content coming at your way very, very soon. Stay tuned and support Verdant in the NLC Division 1.